Good day. I am H. Robert Silverstein, MD, back from New York City, where I had a sighting of George Clooney and his wife Amal at the Mark Hotel. I was standing in the lobby waiting for my friend to come join me. Um, periodically, once a year, I go meet my high school close friend from Bell Fountain, Ohio. I call him the smartest person in the world and think I'm so clever when I say that's because he is. This guy seems, and that is his name, Jerry Guy, seems to know everything about everything. And I'm just astounded. He paid me a high compliment by telling me that at least he could have a conversation with me, implying that he couldn't have a conversation with that many people. So I'm flattered to be his friend. We went through the seventh grade through high school, then off to college, separate colleges. We got together during the holidays when we'd come home. We lived together our freshman year in med school and studied together our sophomore year. Then we went separate directions. And after that, we separated for years and years and years, and eventually came back together at the recommendation of my brother, who bumped into him uh, at some store. We resumed our friendship. So once a year, we meet in New York City and sort of take the place by storm. Not really. We laugh at ourselves for saying that. Traditionally, we had stayed at the Carlisle Hotel during August, but that became too warm. So clearly, the climate change things has a degree of validity. There's no question that it got warmer in New York City. And with my living here in Connecticut and having lived in Massachusetts shortly before I came here, only for 2 years, I was in the Air Force stationed at Westover Air Force Base for 2 years. Winter used to come November 1st and left maybe March 5th, April 1st. That was actual winter, meaning very cold, snow on the ground. Now we hardly see much snow on the ground. Weather can be very nice. I remember an occasional day here and there where the temperature would be like 80 degrees in January, which was a rare event. But the bottom line is that clearly climate change is happening. It is entirely debatable about whether or not it is man-made. I do want to say that clearly the rush to green energy sources is entirely out of step with reality. We simply do not have the infrastructure to support massive numbers of electric vehicles just yet. The turning off of energy, which has literally caused the world to develop in a positive fashion by stopping drilling and leases on federal lands, uh, has worked disastrously economically by the current administration. So my fellow Democrats need to get their act together and understand what constitutes reality. This is clearly prejudicial. The current policy is clearly prejudicial to middle and lower income classes who are now being strapped economically, largely because of high energy prices, which are entirely the responsibility of the current Biden administration. I say this with affection for my fellow Democrats because they need to wake up and quit being counterproductive. You may say, oh, that's a Republican position. No, that's an American position of reality. All you have to do is pay attention to what you're paying in the grocery stores. Incidentally, the position on crime, catch and release, that is utterly absurd. The open southern border is entirely absurd. These are policies where my fellow Democrats need to wake up and stop being so nonsensical. Interestingly, by the way, in that same vein, Kamala Harris's statement a couple of days ago about the relief for the Hurricane Ian, which was so destructive in Florida, being based on equity is absolutely absurd, dangerous, racist, and entirely unacceptable. And she has not corrected that nor apologized, which she really should. In a certain sense, some of you may be thinking, with friends like me, meaning me, with friends like me, who needs enemies? How about just some clear concepts of understanding? You know, it wasn't that Abraham Lincoln wanted to go to war, but there were certain policies that he spoke against, which then resulted in the ending of slavery. It brings up many discussions that we won't get into. Now, recently I have seen many discussions. I want to talk about diabetes. If your sugar, here's what an A1C, which is sort of the measure, it's not the only measure, but it is a quite reasonable measure of your diabetes sugar control. At age 44 or less, your A1C should be 4.4. And thereafter, age 44, your A1C should be no higher than your age with a decimal point. So at age 47, your A1C should not be above 4.7. At age 55, your A1C should not be above 5.5. At age 62, your A1C should not be above 6.2. Now, what happens after age 62? By the way, this is something that I just sort of insightfully saw, which may be wrong, but I say that after age 62, your A1C should not rise above 6.2. Now, how did I arrive at these numbers? I observed people in the many, I'm not telling you how many years of medical practice that I have seen people whose diet was great, and in addition, they were low percent body fat. And I've looked at what their A1C was at their particular age, and that's how I arrived at what I will now call this algorithm, which I'm not sure it's exactly an algorithm, but it is what it is. Now, I encourage you to follow me on Facebook. Some of you will like it, some of you will not like it. It's intended to raise discussions. It's neither pro nor con. I post things for discussion. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's left, sometimes it's down the middle, and sometimes it's just interesting. I sort of am, for whatever reason, I am fascinated with World War II. Not so much with regard to Vietnam, which was when I was in the military, not so much with the Iraq War, and not so much with Afghanistan. But in World War II, the Germans lost 300 airplanes during the Battle of the Bulge. And as I recall, it was like 40,000 men. That Battle of the Bulge went on for 40 days. I was unaware that it was that long. I sort of got the feeling that it began like December 21st and ended January 5th or so. But that's not true. It went on for 40 days and 40 nights. So that's that. Now, so what about diabetes? Back to the diabetes discussion. The current recommendation is for patients to be treated with metformin unless they have advanced kidney disease. Most physicians think that any kidney dysfunction means you should not use metformin. That is not correct. You have to get it down to a low value before metformin should not be continued. And frankly, there's even a discussion of whether or not that is important at all. So stage 1 treatment for diabetes is, actually, I said that wrong. The proper beginning treatment for diabetes in almost all cases is weight reduction to trim. What is the definition of trim? It's not like I'm a perfect example, but when you look down at the abdomen, can you see where the muscles meet the muscles? I read an article just last night that said weight reduction, even if you're in I don't know what their word was, but it meant acceptable levels of body fat. They use BMI. Then if you lose weight, even in these acceptable levels, that will treat, if not cure, diabetes. That is largely a true statement. Diabetes, like high cholesterol, like high blood pressure, like high triglycerides, and even major parts of depression, anxiety, headaches, constipation, diverticulosis, are all made to happen conditions. What do I mean by that? Think about it. What do I mean by made to happen condition? What I'm saying is what I tell my patients as a joke, and everybody laughs at it. Always blame the patient. Now, that's not really intended to be literally true, but it is the introduction to the concept that we make these conditions happen, and we do not need to make these conditions happen. 95% of diabetes, 95% of high blood pressure, 95% of high cholesterol. And what I've just said is the major predisposing factors to the development of heart attack, sudden death, open heart surgery, angioplasty, are all made to happen and preventable, even largely reversible naturally with no medication. So if you got your cholesterol down low enough with medication, yeah, that will generally stop the progression of the hardening of the arteries, so that after you've had your angioplasty or your open heart surgery, you won't need another one. But you do have to be aggressive in those levels. We can talk about those levels. I want to go back to this key thought process. Diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, constipation are made to happen conditions, and they do not need to be made to happen. How do you make them not happen? You make them not happen by, and again, I'm talking primarily about weight and diet here. Obviously, if you're a cigarette smoker or you use tons of salt or you're using cocaine, etc., those will make these diseases happen, at least heart attack or open heart surgery or sudden death and so on. I'm talking about the normal average person who's not using illicit drugs and who is following the standard diet and is overweight, not exercising adequately. Changing the subject and keeping the same. One of the major determinants of longevity is if you're able to go shopping, grocery shopping. I thought that was an interesting twist, but it does describe independence and the ability to get around. If you're that hobbled that you can't get around, that implies that your longevity is not going to be that great. That's not always true. It is a predisposing risk factor or risk marker. So again, now for the fifth time probably, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, diabetes at the 95% level are made to happen conditions that do not need to be made to happen. They can be made to unhappen. If you're aggressive, particularly with your diet, but also with certain medication, you can reverse these conditions and need no medication whatsoever. I have patients who've gotten off cholesterol lowering medicines like statins because their values were so good from what they did. They lost weight, increased their exercise. By the way, weight reduction is 70% diet and 30% exercise, but you do need both of them. Oh, hang on. I've got something to show you. I'll be right back. Don't go away. This is my Lecky walking stick. And this one is portable. And it comes apart like this. And let's see, what did I do wrong here? Oh, like this. and like that. And so it's highly portable. I just pulled it apart, but you don't need ones that pull apart. You can get them relatively inexpensively. This one came from REI, which is where Sears used to be, across from West Farms Mall. But Lecky walking sticks. Now the deal with this is, hang on, I always have a little trouble putting this together. I'm not the most mechanical person you've ever seen, but I think I know how to do it. So I've got to set this to about 124, and then there, I was able to do it. So now it's locked in place. So you put your hand through here, and then you grab hold of the handle like this. And then what's important is doing the Nordic track method of walking. And the Nordic track is where you put one arm out in front of you and you stretch back with the one behind you. And I think that motion is much more important than the elliptical, which is in front of you like this. I am a believer in what's called qi, which has to do with acupuncture, which has to do with the flow of energy within the body. And by putting one arm out and one arm back as you're coordinated, moving your legs at the same time, I think an elliptical is good if you use it. I think Nordic walking and a Nordic track ski machine. And by the way, I had vegetable soup for breakfast, which is a really good idea. You don't need to think in terms of oatmeal or toast or eggs. Have vegetable soup. And when I say vegetable soup, that's all vegetables. If you're overweight, no pasta, no potatoes. In that sense, a good minestrone soup is a perfect idea. That'll help you immensely with weight loss. Let's get back to the exercise. So I believe that the flow of energy within the body, like acupuncture describes, by putting one arm out in front of you and the other arm behind you, while you're moving your legs, makes a major difference in your health and life expectancy. The article said that Nordic walking was the best exercise. Now, I don't think that's actually true. I think swimming is the best exercise, but ideally that would be done in a warm enough ocean that you can swim in rather than one that's too cold or too choppy. And that the Nordic walking is probably the best on land exercise, as well as the Nordic track. Now, the Nordic track had these loose boards that move forwards and backwards. And again, you have to be sure that you don't just do this action as you're doing. You need to do the full stretch action as you're walking. So let me repeat. Lecky walking sticks really change the quality of your exercise immensely. They get the chi energy flowing. And let's say I'm wrong about the chi stuff. Let's say that. It obviously is not harmful to do what I say. It's a great idea. But there's always a risk to everything. So you're using your walking sticks and it's kind of icy or it's wet, and you slip and your stick and you fall down. Yes, there's a downside to everything. That's the concept of yin and yang. Yin means too much good goes into bad and too much bad goes into good. So there's always this transition. Nothing is guaranteed 100% good. Nothing is guaranteed 100% bad. So we can debate that, but that would take a while. That would take a live discourse to do that. Now, so weight loss is 70% diet and 30% exercise. The healthiest diet for the human biology is to get as close to vegan, V-E-G-A-N, as you can. Those people in my practice who are essentially 100% vegan are my healthiest patient, but I don't think you have to be. I think a lot of times that strains things a little bit. So since I always got an A, if I got a 90 and wasn't first in my class with the people who got 99s and hundreds, I always thought 90 was good enough. So let's say there are 3 meals a day and 7 days a week. Yes, maybe you're doing intermittent fasting and eating once a day, which would mean there's 7 meals in a week. But I think 90% is the correct idea. Let's stick with the 3 meals a day idea. 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that's 21 meals. 90% of 21 is either 18 or 19 meals a week that should be, quote, field. Foods exactly as they grow up out of the ground and in the field. First of all, you got to remember, if you're overweight, you want to avoid the carbs. You also want to avoid too much of the fats. But let's stick with the carbs for a second. Carbs are brown rice, white rice, bread, cereals, pastas, chips, crackers, cakes, cookies, muffins. Those are the carbs that keep the weight on, and you don't want them. My recommended to my patients ideal diet is berries, cooked vegetables, vegetable soup, and beans. And so when I say berries, I'm not saying cherries, I'm not saying grapes, I'm not saying bananas, apples, plums, pears, I'm saying berries. Berries are the lowest calorie, yet tasty and high antioxidant fruit. So berries and some almond milk. You say, oops, almond milk, that's a processed food. Yes, nothing I say is 100%. You have to get the drift of it and be thinking correctly. So if you chopped up 4 walnuts or 4 almonds and put some plain almond milk or rice milk or hemp milk, I do like those milks that are have added calcium and vitamin D. I'm not so much concerned about the vitamin D, but I am concerned about the calcium. The calcium in milk, by the way, is not as well absorbed as the calcium in supplemented rice milk or almond milk. There isn't any supplemented calcium in hemp milk. Hemp milk and oat milk are sort of my favorite recommendations, except they don't have the calcium. So that takes me back to the supplemented rice and almond milks. So breakfast could be a vegetable soup, and that is the ideal breakfast if you're overweight. But if that's not your cup of tea, then what you do is you have the berries, which you could throw in a crock pot and cook on low heat overnight. Berries with some of that calcium supplemented almond milk or rice milk, not vanilla, not chocolate, because those are sweetened. And then chop up your walnuts or almonds or pecans to give you a little bit of crunch. What nuts don't I recommend? I don't recommend peanuts. I don't recommend cashews. Cashews have the same saturated fat that butter does. Butter is one of the most hardening the arteries causing foods. So I say don't do that. So the berries and the almond milk with the chopped up nuts. If you want to make a smoothie, you buy something like spring mix and you mix it in with that, run it through your blender. Then you can have that. Don't add ice. Ice does things, I don't remember exactly why, but it makes sense. It made sense to me at the time, and it's certainly not a problem. I like foods sort of at room temperature and warm just in general, although certainly I don't want that for a salad. 2/3 of your vegetables should be cooked and 1/3 should be raw. As salad, you put on some Fini, F-I-N-I, vinegar that you can get at Big Y. I don't know if you can get it at ShopRite or Stop and Shop, but I've seen it at Big Y. Fini vinegar, F-I-N-I, plus some organic extra virgin olive oil. And at Big Y, I found one bottle of one brand of extra virgin olive oil that was unfiltered. And I think unfiltered is a terrific idea. You used to be able to get unfiltered, organic, extra virgin olive oil at Trader Joe's, but they don't have it this year so far. They might have it later on. Getting back, berries, cooked vegetables, vegetable soup, and beans. And then the Lecky walking sticks from REI over where Sears used to be across from West Farms Mall in the same shopping center where Trader Joe is. I really like Trader Joe. They sort of hold down the prices. I also like Aldi. I like Big Y. Big Y has the best mushrooms. They have oyster mushrooms, which just absolutely take the place of meat. Cook things with as little oil as you can. Oil is high calorie, high fat, will keep the weight on. If you're going to use an oil, I recommend the organic extra virgin olive oil that is unfiltered. And remember the concept for foods just in general, field. Foods exactly as they grow up out of the ground and in the field. I have so many patients, and unfortunately, particularly overweight patients, who tell me that they have oatmeal for breakfast. First of all, oatmeal is high calorie and you shouldn't be eating it if you're overweight. What defines overweight? We've already gone over that once. Absence of abdominal clear lines of definition and demarcation. And if that's not where you are, then try to get as close to that as you reasonably can. Don't drive yourself nuts, but work on it, and that is the goal. That's how to lower cholesterol, triglycerides, blood pressure, diabetes, et cetera, and reduce your risk of heart attack, open heart surgery, angioplasty, cardiac catheterization, need for medication. And what's more, even if you do those things and you do have that procedure, when is your next occurrence of that condition going to be? If you're not good enough with your levels of cholesterol, triglycerides, blood pressure, diabetes, blood sugar, and so on, there will be a recurrence of open heart surgery, angioplasty, and so on. Now, what constitutes a proper blood pressure? In most cases, if you're on treatment for medication, I like a blood pressure right at 125/80 or maybe a little bit less. If you do not have high blood pressure, then I like 110 on medication. If you do not have high blood pressure and you're on no blood pressure medication, I like 110/115/60 to 70. The reason I choose the lower number for people who do not have treated high blood pressure is because the blood vessels become stiffened by that high blood pressure, and that lower number may be too low, causing dizziness and faintness and actual fainting. So 125/80 if you're on medication. As a matter of fact, when my patients with high blood pressure have a blood pressure below 125 for the top number, the systolic number, or 80 for the bottom number, I tell them not to, if the number is below that, below both of those, I tell them not to take their blood pressure medication that day. Now, I do ask them to measure their blood pressure later in the day to see if it went up. And if it doesn't go up, then they don't need to take it. And then they have to check the blood pressure again tomorrow. And if it remains below, then they don't need their medication again. That's the way I do it. That's not the way most doctors do it. But I believe I make the joke, and everyone laughs at it again. When I say all drugs are poison, I hope I don't kill you. When I'm asked what are the side effects of a medicine, and it's what's my point? My point is medicines are not really good for you. They're better for you than the condition that you have, meaning the high blood pressure. But what if you can clear the high blood pressure or your numbers turn out to be below the 125/80? Then I say skip the blood pressure medication. And you might say, well, what if you have heart failure? Or what if you have kidney disease? Look, all patients are handmade one of a kind, and you have to individualize for everybody. So I can't give out general directions that if your blood pressure is below 125/80, don't take blood pressure medication. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that these are the principles that I go by with my patient, and you are free to choose and discuss with your physician or healthcare giver or provider, as the new term is. I really don't like being termed provider or healthcare giver, but that's the name of the game these days. So That's it. Now, by the way, a brown rice, vegetable, bean, fruit, nut, and seed diet is how you prevent cancer of the pancreas, how you prevent cancer of the prostate, cancer of the breast, cancer of the colon, et cetera, et cetera. So it isn't like I'm just talking about hardening the arteries, open heart surgery, angioplasty, and stents. I'm also talking about, and this is the motto of the Preventive Medicine Center, the simultaneous prevention and reversal where possible of multiple diseases, simultaneous multiple diseases. So that is the concept. Now, let me know what you think about crime in West Hartford. I'm very interested in that. I'll probably end up getting a ticket for going 36 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone for lipping off about that. But hey, I'll try to be careful, not go 36 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Yes, I know the police are forgiving, but on the other hand, if you cross a line, you just might get caught and so on. So I'm hoping I don't get caught. I think too many of the signs, I don't know whether the police expect that people will drive faster, but I think some of the recommendations for speed limits are not correct or are not good sense, is what I'm saying. So, and of course, speed kills. I saw an interesting ad. It says, whenever, I forget how it said, but basically it says accidents that occur when you're speeding are not accidents or something like that. And that is true. There's no doubt. By the way, when I was walking around in New York City, people were smoking hash pipes on the street. The odor of the marijuana was very strong from time to time. And this was in a very well-to-do neighborhood. I got a kick out of this. I walked past 3 people where one of the people was not smoking the hash pipe, but the other, one of the fellows that was standing there was coughing with his deep bronchitis cough. There is no doubt about it that inhaling marijuana or hash is toxic. It's hard on the lungs and it's going to cause lung disease over time. We are starting to see the downsides that I have predicted for a long time from legalizing marijuana, hash, and so on. There's increased auto accidents where the driver is high. There's any number of problems. I don't know whether it's better to have it be legal so that the cartels don't get the profits. But the bottom line is alcohol was bad enough. Why unleash another addictive toxin? People will say marijuana is not addictive. That is utter nonsense. You may not go totally through with what you call recognized withdrawal, but the fact of the matter is people who start it want to keep it up, and it definitely affects multiple functions. Interestingly, some woman had breast cancer, and she used the mushrooms that affect brain function, and she had marijuana. She got standard chemotherapy. I don't know if she got radiation, but it apparently cured her breast cancer. Now, does that mean that that's a good a good therapeutic approach? No one knows at the present time, but I would urge caution. I do use cannabidiol, CBD, for pain relief. One of my favorite recommended pain nostrums was a product called Soothanol X2. I just usually called it Soothanol, Soothanol. Somehow it got taken off the market, to my great disappointment. Now I'm using a kind of a smelly, semi-thick apple butter type cream called Pain Warrior. And I couple that with over-the-counter cortisone 10, and I couple that with CBD 750 by green roads. Although there are some CBDs that are even higher frequency. All right, good day. God bless you all. Thank you. This is H. Robert Silverstein, MD, for the Preventive Medicine Center in West Hartford Cable TV.